Alright, let's get started. Today on First Pass, we're taking a trip through the history of UNSC mainstay cruiser designs that led up to the post-war era Autumn-class heavy cruiser, the literal successor to the iconic Pillar of Autumn. So now without further ado, our history lesson begins in the decades prior to the Human Covenant War, way back in 2509, 2510-ish, with the introduction of the first line of Halcyon-class light cruisers, of which the Pillar of Autumn was in fact a part of. That's right, the most famous ship in the Halo franchise is also one of the oldest vessels of the modern cruiser lineage. A total of 50 cruisers were constructed, with the first 11 of them featuring a brand new internal structural design, a honeycomb of braces that drastically increased the vessel's durability and overall integrity. This new design wasn't continued in any further Halcyon class due to the extraordinary costs and resources required. The Pillar of Autumn was one of these original 11. Unfortunately, the class also suffered from being woefully undergunned, being equipped with only one magnetic accelerator cannon, 4 Shiva missiles, 6 Archer missile pods, and 6 M910 Rampart point defense guns. This amount was generally sufficient to contend with the commandeered and modified civilian vessels the insurrectionists would commonly use. As such, the Halcyon was rapidly replaced by the Marathon-class heavy cruiser by the start of the Human Covenant War in 2525. Despite the Marathon being classified as a heavy versus a light cruiser being only 21 meters longer than the 1171 meter Halcyon, this difference of classification seems more due to its more powerful suite of weapons and vastly increased hangar space for fighters. While the Halcyon was effective at smaller engagements and escort duty, the Marathon was better designed for large-scale combat with vessels of similar tonnage. This would have helped the vessels in the war if they weren't so technologically outclassed by the far more advanced and powerful Covenant ships. Overall, the Marathon class was equipped with 2 Macs versus the Halcyon's single Mac, 1800 Archer missiles, and a variety of fusion rockets and point defense guns. Even the carried fighter complement was increased from 5 to 24 longswords. Unfortunately for the class though, the war took a heavy toll in the Marathon's numbers, forcing the UNSC to reactivate the outdated Halcyons. Though this only temporarily replenished the cruiser fleet, it was only a band-aid for the ever more dire situation the fleet as a whole faced against the Covenant onslaught. To bring the war to an end before humanity was completely wiped out, Operation Red Flag was born. I'll leave the details of the plan for a later video, but it called for the capture of a Covenant vessel, which is no easy feat. So they took the Pillar of Autumn and gave it an extensive and experimental set of upgrades that negated a number of failures of its original design, namely underpowered reactors and corresponding engines. Along with its new AI, Cortana, the vessel sported a vastly more powerful arsenal of weapons that almost no other UNSC vessels could match. It had an experimental Mark II light Mac with a triple fire option, 4 Shiva nuclear missiles, 32 Archer missile pods, 18 point defense guns, 8 Mark 33 coal guns, and 6 autocannons. This loadout was several times more powerful than the standard Halcyon, which made the ship one of the most expensive ships in the war. This ship proved to be critical in the final chapters of the war, bringing it to a swift though pyrrhic end. The technologies used and pioneered in the Pillar of Autumn would be continued in the Autumn-class heavy cruisers, which was produced post-war. The Mac cannon was further upgraded to the Mark IX heavy Mac. Though it kept the 32 missile pods, the rest of the secondary weapons were cut back a bit, with 4 Mark 40 coil guns, 6 autocannons, and a much more standard 6-point defense guns. This was more or less a streamlined and production version of the Pillar of Autumn. One interesting note was that the trademark honeycomb armor of the Pillar of Autumn wasn't included in the production class, though this is very likely due to the need of a new cruiser class that could be both powerful and be built in high enough numbers to replace those that were lost in the war. It was simply too expensive for a crash program, especially since a number of remaining Halcyon were rebuilt into the new Autumn class. On the flip side though, the Autumn class did feature shield reinforced armor that could vastly increase its durability. Instead of a single large shield that enveloped the entire vessel, like did with most shield-equipped vessels, it used reactive localized shielding to help augment its normal titanium armor. The titanium grade is a bit ambiguous, with some sources saying it's the standard A2 variety that all other UNSC vessels are built from, but some claim it's the mythical A3 variety that the immensely powerful UNSC Infinity is equipped with. Either way though, it's still extremely durable. Its heavy cruiser designation is more than just a reference to its firepower like the Marathon, but is also to its much greater length of 1425 meters, being much closer to the 1518 meter Valiant Super Heavy cruiser class than its predecessors. So all this looks really cool on paper, but what was the tactical viability of the class? Given the exhausted and fractured nature of the now former Covenant Empire, it was unlikely to have to contend with massive naval engagements for a very long time. To that point, it would most likely be relegated to performing escort duties for larger vessels like supercarriers, as seen with the UNSC Infinity, and smaller engagements with Covenant fragment groups. For these roles, the vessel arguably overperforms, as the design clearly leans towards heavier engagements, which is understandable given how devastating the last war was. Should a large fleet of Covenant vessels actually have to face these ships, their combat performance could easily be almost comparable to that of the Punic-class carriers, which were some of the only wartime UNSC ships that could truly fight one-on-one against Covenant vessels. The battle would be a much more level playing field than those seen during the war. Overall, each subsequent class and iteration were reflective of the conflicts of their age, from the insurrectionists combating Halcyon class to the near-wartime Marathon class, followed by the experimental and Pyrrhic victory of the Pillar of Autumn, finally ending in the post-war mass production and advanced technology of the Autumn class. These vessels served as the backbones and nominal command assets of the UNSC's fleets, and will prove essential in conflicts to come. And now we travel through the lineage of mainstay cruisers of the UNSC. If you have ideas or suggestions for other ships or verses, please comment below. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe for more content, and remember, this was your first pass at the origins of the Autumn class.